It's Dirty Story Night, and we're back with another installment of our Mad Lab month. Mad Lab being the host site of It's All Been Done Radio Hour and the place we record these dirty stories. Greg has a true story for you. Greg is one of the Mad Labbers whom we love. But before we get to that, we'd like you to check out our host site, IABD Presents. It's All Been Done Presents. Go to IABDpresents.com. And there are a lot of great programs there. One program is QBC, which is Quarterly Book Club. Why quarterly? Because books are long and you're busy. You should go there immediately because we are in the middle of the second quarter for the year. We're reading Defending Jacob by William Landy on the website. It'll show you how you can interact and discuss the book as we go. There'll also be video discussion once it's all over. So you'll want to get over to IABD Presents and check that out. Now enjoy this latest episode of Dirty Story Night.
All right, so the story starts when I wake up one Saturday morning and I find that this friendly woman from a frontier state has her mouth on my wiener. Now, it may be hard for me to convince you that I didn't want this. It would have been impossible for me to convince her that I didn't want this. But I kind of didn't want this, but you know how it is. Eventually, you just kind of go with it. So I'm going to back up a bit. The I in this story is Greg. At that time, Greg was the director of a show going on at Mad Lab that was actually going to close that later that night. Big parties after closing the shows. And this is 2002. There's a lot more drinking than there even is now, even though we didn't have woos back then. So we're going to flash forward a little bit now, okay? We're going to skip the part where she tells me my semen tastes like Novocaine. We're going to skip the fact that we had breakfast together, and she goes and she leaves town for a little bit. And I'm thinking, fine, relaxed, got a funny story to tell my friends later. And then 5 o'clock hits. Now, by 5 o'clock, I got a show coming up. I've just come from a Chinese place, which I called Crickets. And I called it Crickets because a lot of my friends told me they'd found crickets in the food there. Now, I never found a cricket in my food. Point is, I just ate a huge ton of Chinese food. I'm really hungover. And the show that night, I'm just supposed to go in there, announce, and then sit and watch it and laugh. I don't have to do anything. So I want to take a fucking nap. My door opens, and a friendly woman from a frontier state walks right in and says, "You thought you got rid of me." And I'm thinking to myself, I actually did think I got rid of you. But I didn't. She says, "Can I take you out for dinner now?" Sorry, I just ate a huge Chinese meal and I just want to take a nap. And I'm thinking to myself, shit, now I'm going to have to defend myself or whatever. She might be offended. Nope, she immediately just says, okay, well, what about Chris number 1 or Adrian or Pete or Steven or Chris number 2 that I met down at the theater yesterday? Well, I gave her a couple of those phone numbers, and eventually Chris number 1 agreed. They went out to dinner, and I'm thinking, cool, end of that story. So, we're going to flash forward a little bit further here. We get to the end of the show. So, we actually had 2 shows that time. This was back when Mad Lab would do its show. Comrades Christmas Carol is what we did that night. And then FFN, Full Frontal Nudity, would do their performance, which was the story of Carl. So, that started about 10:30. So, by about 12 o'clock, we're going to have a humongous party. Probably worse than the night before we had. So we hit that. Chris number 1 and the friendly lady from a frontier town come to watch Comrades Christmas Carol. And they're having a great time. For me, it was one of the great nights of my life as far as theater goes. It's closing night of a show I directed. It was my favorite show I've ever been a part of. And it went awesome. And I was no longer hungover because I was getting pretty drunk. During the late night show, the FFN show, Chris number 1, who went out to dinner with friendly lady from a frontier state, he has to perform. She stays there watching. I went to some bar with some friends with the plan to come back for the party. Now I come back to the party, and again, as each part of the story goes, the drinking's heavier and heavier and heavier. And now I notice as I'm walking through this party of lots of people getting drunk, I noticed a friendly lady from a frontier state kind of standing around looking at everybody the way she had looked at me the previous morning. Like this kind of. I interpret that look as whatever I see, I'm going to put in my mouth. So I'm pretty fucking tired by this time myself. So this is the old Mad Lab. The old Mad Lab's laid out a little different than the current Mad Lab. The old Mad Lab had an office. And then you go in the office. And then you could walk up some this kind of makeshift little wooden ladder we had built to the booth. And if you go up into the booth, nobody can find you. Nobody can see you. That's a really good place to go to sleep when you're really, really drunk. So that's all the immediate first person part of the story, because the next part of the story happened while I was asleep. While I'm asleep at that time, friendly lady from a frontier state has made really good friends with Chris number one, it seems. Apparently, there was some making out going on in the office where a huge filing cabinet got knocked over, which, by the way, remember, the office is within about 10 feet of where I'm sleeping, and I did not wake up. Regardless, at some point in time, friendly lady from a frontier state is out of the room, and Chris number two walks in to talk to Chris number one. Hey, man. Yeah? What do you think, man? We should tag team her. I don't know. Whatever. He leaves. Chris number one doesn't even think anything of it. And according to Chris number one, about 10 minutes later, he's sitting there in the office by himself, and he hears footsteps outside of the office. It's okay, man. I already talked to him. He's into it. So apparently this threesome even began. Now, I'm not going to say this is the only threesome that's ever happened in Mad Lab. I don't know if there's ever been otherwise a threesome in Mad Lab. But it's the only threesome that ever happened while I was sleeping up in the booth that caused me to wake up and walk down the stairs right into it. So I walk down the stairs. I see what's going on. I'm kind of out of it, kind of sleepy, kind of groggy, really drunk, and all this. And I see vague shapes, and one vague shape is bobbing up and down, and there's another vague shape there and another vague shape behind the middle vague shape, and I think I'm going back up into the booth and falling back to sleep because I didn't want to have to walk past that. Well, that kind of stuff goes on, I guess, a little bit longer. I think I fell right back to sleep. Eventually, someone else decides it's time to go home. It's time to get me home. And so my friend, who apparently knows what's going on, starts making a whole lot of noise outside the door so he doesn't have to look in the hopes that it'll wake me up. And I guess it worked, because at some point I woke up and I kind of remembered what was happening. And so I thought, okay, what I'm going to have to do is while I'm up here, I'm going to have to get up and make a lot of noise so that it's obvious to anybody who's fucking down there, oh, there's somebody here. Let's stop for the moment. Well, 1 out of 3 people stopped, apparently. And so I walked down the steps, and I saw my friend Chris number one. Now, I didn't register in my mind that he didn't have any pants on. He later reminded me of that fact. But he said I walked down the steps and he saw this look on my face. I maybe didn't do the pointing, but according to him and the way I kind of interpret that look is your turn. So that's the look I gave him, not that he gave me. So anyway, but there was still bobbing and whatever going on. Anyway, I got myself bobbing. There was a bobbing head going on, I think. Not really sure. I get out the door and then realize, oh, shit, I don't have a ride home. It's about a 1.5 mile, 2 mile walk home. It was snowing a lot that day. So I decided I'm just going to go ahead, lie down on the couch. Just the kind of last bits of the story. Remember, this is Chris number one and Chris number two. Apparently, when the whole thing was done, our heroine, the friendly lady from a frontier state, turns to the two gentlemen and says, I just got christened. And the moral of this story is, don't get Chinese food from a place that has a nickname like Crickets. All right.